All right, Alexander, let's do an update as to what is going on in Ukraine. What is the situation with the great counteroffensive, Zelensky's counteroffensive? How is that going? We've got the news from the Ukrainian parliament, the Rada. They have approved a type of social benefits system where Polish citizens pretty much have all the rights of Ukrainian citizens for about 18 months. What does that tell you? I think that's very, very interesting. And what else can we discuss about what's going on in Ukraine? I think that's pretty much. Oh, no, no, no. Wait, we got the New York Times story where they are claiming 75,000 Russian soldiers have either died or have been injured in the conflict. And they're also claiming that 80% of the Russian military is now currently bogged down in Ukraine, which is interesting because if 80% of the Russian military is bogged down in Ukraine, how in God's name is Russia holding their pre-planned, and I believe it's annual, military exercises in the east of Vostok exercises? Something's not adding up. Anyway, I think those are the three big stories, unless I'm missing something else.
No, you're not missing. I think you've summed it up pretty well. Now, first of all, let's start with the Great Kherson counteroffensive. It's stalled. I mean, when I say stalled, I mean it hasn't actually started. Now, they took those, they made those missile strikes against the bridge, the Antonovsky Bridge in Kherson. This led to all sorts of excited commentaries, especially in the British media, about how this is a game changer and how the Russian forces west of the Dnieper River were cut off. Now we're getting reports that that's not so. There's been a very interesting article in, of all places, CNN journalists going around to these places, talking to Ukrainian soldiers. And what we hear is that the Russians have built pontoon bridges across the Dnieper. They're able to resupply their troops across the Dnieper. They're able to ferry supplies across the Dnieper. It seems, and this is a separate thing from the CNN story, that a Ukrainian advance that we were hearing a lot about, and which the British Ministry of Defence was talking up 2 days ago, towards one of the sort of minor rivers here. It was not such a minor river, but one of the lesser rivers, the Ingulets River, that was driven back with very heavy losses. So the Ukrainians were thrown back. And this CNN journalist says that the Ukrainian soldiers he's talking to are telling him there are not enough of them, that they don't have enough armour, they don't have enough artillery, they're very exposed to Russian missile and airstrikes, they're suffering heavy losses, and that it would be very, very difficult anyway for them to advance on Kherson city over open country where they would be immediately open steppe land, farmland. They would be immediately exposed to aircraft and missile strikes by the Russians. And frankly, it doesn't look like a good idea. So, and they also said, interestingly enough, that until the artillery struggle with the Russians is won, there's no point in even considering an offensive in Kherson region. So that looks to me as if this Kherson offensive is gradually dwindling into the mists. It doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. To the extent that anything's been attempted, it hasn't worked, and this attempt to cut Russian supply lines probably isn't going to work either. I would add, by the way, as a piece of history, that a Russian force during the Second World War, a big Russian force, got cut off in Stalingrad from the rest of Russia. And the Russians had to send supplies across the Volga to keep the Russians in Stalingrad fighting. And this happened during the winter with the ice and with the German shelling, but the Russians were able to do it. I would have thought that they could manage to keep their troops supplied across the Dnieper River, where they have complete aerial dominance and where the Ukrainians are only able to launch a small number of missiles. So I think that this Kherson offensive, the more I read about it, the more I study it, the more improbable it becomes. I think this is a PR stunt. I think the British have spent an enormous amount of time focusing on it. I don't think it has much reality, to be truthful. And of course, whilst we hear all about the Kherson offensive, we're getting more and more news that the Russian military, the Russian army, is advancing in Donbass. They're punching holes through the Ukrainian defense lines. Things are not looking good for the Ukrainians there. So talk about an offensive that hasn't happened and which may not happen by the Ukrainians in Kherson region and whose prospects look dim, taking your attention away from an actual Russian offensive in Donbass, which continues to grind the Ukrainians down and is now within sighting distance of clearing Donetsk of the Ukrainians.
All right, let's talk about, which one do you want to talk about first? The New York Times article, or
shall we talk about the law?
Poland-Ukraine merger?
The new Poland, Ukraine, Russia. This is, as you absolutely rightly say, it's an astonishing story. I mean, what it amounts to, it seems to me, is the annexation of Ukraine by Poland. Maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I mean, to all intents and purposes, I mean, if you're a Pole and you come to Ukraine now, you have all the rights Ukrainians have. You can run the place. You can do whatever you want in Ukraine. Notice that Ukrainians, it's not reciprocated in Poland. It shows an extraordinary, mentality and outlook, and one wonders why it's happening. And I would say there's possibly two reasons. I mean, there's the generous reason. I stress the generous reason, which is that the Ukrainians are still hoping that they're going to be able to get the Polish army to come to their rescue at some point. And then there's the cynical reason, which I think is the much more plausible one, which is that they can all see the writing is on the wall. They're all intending to take out Polish citizenship as soon as they can, and that they're preparing their bolt holes and their escape routes, their rat lines, if you like, through Poland. But it is an extraordinary law that is being passed. I mean, all this battle, supposedly, to keep Ukraine independent of Russia and to subordinate it to Poland instead.
Yeah, I mean, before we get to the New York Times story, I mean, why would Polish citizens want to go to Ukraine right now to live and work? I mean, that's fantasy, isn't it?
It is. It's complete fantasy. I mean, it isn't going to happen. As I said, it's not, I think, really about that. I would have thought any Pole with two brain cells to rub together, and most Poles, of course, have that, are not going to go to Ukraine at this particular moment in time. Why would they want to? As you rightly said, the country's collapsing economically. It's just defaulted on its debts. Its natural gas company has also defaulted. It's in the middle of a war. I've just spoken, by the way, to a Ukrainian person I know in London who's just been to Ukraine, to Western Ukraine, and says everywhere, there's missile strikes. The war is, omnipresent. You can't escape it. The mood is very, very bad, apparently, in Ukraine at the moment. So no Polish person is going to go to Ukraine at this time. It's, on the one hand, as I said, it subordinates Ukraine to Poland. But the reality is, as I said, I think it's all about preparing an escape route for Ukrainian politicians to Poland. I mean, that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, it's
they'll all take Polish citizenship, and they'll flee.
Break the glass in case of emergency. Break the glass. And I think we're getting to the point where
exactly
they're going to break the glass, and that's the emergency escape route.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Medvedev. Once again, before we get to that New York Times article, do you think there's a coincidence in the timing of that Medvedev map that he put out on Telegram the other day, and this law being passed by the Ukrainian parliament? Because Medvedev must have known that this law was on the table to be passed, and then he puts out a map which shows a Ukraine. And Medvedev said, "This is how the Western analysts see Ukraine," where it showed Poland with a big chunk. as well as Hungary and Romania,
Yes.
but it showed Poland with that big
Yeah.
chunk of the West. Do you think that's
Yeah.
coincidence, or was Medvedev signaling
No.
something, or did he know something?
No, he knows something, and he might, for all I know, be signalling something. But it's not a coincidence. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's clearly the attack dog, the verbal attack dog on Ukraine. He's, if you like, the person who's responding to Arestovich and the Ukrainian propaganda machine. He hits back. But whereas Arestovich, for those who don't know, he's Zelensky's press spokesman, peddles fantasies. Medvedev, in his very vigorous way, peddles facts. And I think he knows exactly what he's doing. So when he publishes those maps, he's talking about what I think some people in Warsaw and perhaps in Kiev are already thinking. And it's not a coincidence. He knows about the law. My impression is, by the way, that the Russians have obviously they have a massively effective intelligence operation in Ukraine itself. I mean, they seem to know where every Ukrainian unit is located, where every command headquarters is located. But I think they've also got a very, very effective intelligence operation in Warsaw as well. And I wonder how that's been set up. But clearly it's working very efficiently, and they're very well informed about thinking in Warsaw too.
All right. New York Times, 75,000 plus Russian soldiers wounded or dead, and 80% of the Russian military is bogged down in Ukraine. And then we have at the same time, from August 30th to September 5th, the Vostok military exercises, massive military exercises. How do you square that
Massive
circle?
military exercise. Well, you can't square it, and I mean the whole thing is just fiction. I mean we've now escaped any discussion of realities. I mean I don't know what Russian casualties are in Ukraine, but we're getting different figures now coming out from all sorts of different people. So a couple of days ago, the CIA director said that the Russians had lost 15,000 dead in Ukraine. Clearly that didn't go down well with someone, because then we got 75,000 casualties, dead and wounded, in the Russian military in Ukraine, which is various people have pointed out would be more than half the Russian force that's been deployed in Ukraine, which then begs the question, how are the Russians still advancing? How are they advancing in Donbass, which they are, by the way? How are they able to hold in places like Kharkiv? How are they hitting back in places like Kherson? I mean, that doesn't make any sense either. And then we get other figures by other people. So Ukraine says they've killed 40,000 Russians. The British come up with other figures as well. The BBC does its surveys of, cemeteries and people who've been buried. It puts the number of dead Russians at about 6,000. Vast discrepancies here. The most reliable figure is probably the BBC one, but none of these figures should be taken seriously. And frankly, this is just fiction. It's obviously somebody making things up, lots of people making things up. And I ask the question, who are they deceiving? I mean, the Russians know their level of casualties. The Russian high command knows how many losses it's incurred. The Russian military knows how many losses it's incurred. So it's deceiving the Western public, and it's deceiving the Ukrainians themselves. And the only reason this is being done, I suspect, is to try to keep this ball of Western support, this car, if you like, keep it trundling on. People are saying, where is all this going? We're losing, Ukraine is losing, we're suffering all these enormous economic losses, but you have all these estimates of Russian losses. The Russians can't keep this up much longer. They're suffering massive casualties. Half their army is being killed. 80% of their army is bogged down. They're about to run out of steam. The British MI6 chief said that a few days ago. Their economy is about to collapse. There's been a report from Yale, a team in Yale, saying the same thing. They're going around, they're looking for statistics. It's all, when you look at it, the methodology is just terrible. But they're coming up with all these stories in order to try and hold the line, to keep the support continuing, to keep the weapon systems being delivered, to prevent the sanctions being diluted further, to stave off criticism. So they're coming up with these inflated and ridiculous casualty estimates, which I suspect they themselves don't really believe, and all these other claims about the economy and all the rest. But we shouldn't take them seriously. The Russians have scoffed at them. Peskov, who was Putin's spokesman, has said that this is fake news. And as I said, it doesn't fool the Russians. It's intended to fool us.
Yeah, let's just keep this going just a little bit longer. Can we keep this going until the midterms? Can we keep this going so we could sell another 100 HIMARS to Poland, which they've done, just so we can pocket some more money? Can we keep this going so we can get another 5 billion to Ukraine so we can pocket some more money? I mean, this is the grift here that's going on. Yeah,
exactly. It's the grift. It's the grift. I mean, it is the grift. I mean, and you as often happens, you just make things up. You tell ludicrous things. I mean, we've all met people who, shall we say, oversell. I'm being careful what I say now, in order to keep the grift running, and that's what they're doing. In reality, as I said, the war grinds on, and Ukraine is losing. And it's continuing to lose. It's losing more men, more machines, more territory, more towns, more villages. It's going to very soon lose an awful lot more if the direction of events in Donbass continues as it is, as I'm certain it will.
Yeah. Remember Medvedev's map. That's what's at stake. And my final question actually is when the collapse happens, what's going to be the reaction of the collective West? That's what I'm very interested to see. What is going to be the reaction? How are they going to distract away from this? How are they going to explain this away to their people, or are they just not? Are they just going to
whatever they do, the one thing that I think we can both agree about is that the one thing these people are good at is news management. I mean, they're superb at it. So they'll find some way. They'll talk about how there was somebody let the side down. Hungary is responsible for obstructing the sanctions. The Republicans in Congress slowed down the flow of arms. The Chinese or the Iranians provided the Russians with all those drones. They'll come up with some story, and of course the distraction will already be there. Taiwan, the Gulf, Iran, who knows? But they'll find some way. They always do.
Yeah. The only difference this time around is that the collective West is going to feel a lot of economic pain from the decisions that they've made by going after Russia. That's going to be the big difference in relation to Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or anything else that they've done.
This is absolutely true. And the other thing to say is this. I mean, Afghanistan, Iraq, they're all far away. They're far away from the US, but they're far away from Europe as well. But of course, Ukraine is not. It's really almost, it is geographically, culturally part of Europe. So in the US, they can walk away from this. In Europe, we can't. It's going to have a very, very big impact here. Bigger, I think, than some people in the US realize.
All right, we will leave it there. The Duran.locals.com. Duran shop, use the code GOODDAY, get 10% off all merchandise, and look for all of our channels on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram. There's a Good Day mug. Take care.